Welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm giving my thoughts on real books versus audiobooks. Are real books really that much better? And are audiobooks just as good as reading a book? So, my first thing for books, I just love books. I love the physicality of books. I love that they're objects. Yes, at the heart of them, it's what they're telling. It's a story. It's the words. It's what's inside them. But on the surface, it's an object. It's a physical thing, and I love books. You know, there's all the different covers, all the different fonts, all the different editions, everything about them. And I love possessing books. One of the biggest arguments for audiobooks is one of my biggest arguments against them, and that is space. And this applies to Kindle very much as well. People are like, you can have thousands of books all right here, not taking up all this space. And I'm like, I would love those thousands of books to be taking up space in my home. Yes, please. If you literally don't have room for more books, I know it is a great option, but I love having books. I love having bookshelves. Bookshelves don't really take up that much space. You can put them along the walls. I definitely know people who have too many books, but for the most part, the space thing, I would love to have physical copies of all the books that I love. I don't want them to just be digital. I want to actually have them and possess them. And also, having them digitally, it doesn't feel like they really are something that you own. Something that I don't like about audiobooks is that it's not something you physically have, but you're paying oftentimes as much or more for an audiobook than for a physical copy of the book. And I understand, you're paying for an experience, you're still paying for the story, but I want to actually have the book. And being able to flip through it and find different sections is so much more convenient than, skimming through an audiobook or a Kindle book. Yeah, much prefer a physical, actual book because of possessing it, because I love books. And then secondly, there is the experience. Reading is an interactive experience. I know you're just sitting there, not doing anything, but when you read, it is an activity. You're not just completely passively taking it in. Yeah, I mean, you can, and your thoughts can wander, but when you're reading it, it's an experience, and it's something that you have to sit and make time for, or snatch time out of your day for. It's not something you can just consume on the go, which is also one of the huge arguments for audiobooks. You actually have to make time for books and enjoy it as an experience. It forces you to take time, to slow down. It's an activity that, I've loved from my childhood. Growing up, I listened to very few audiobooks, and I don't know, the act of reading is very important and special to me. And of course, with audiobooks, the narrator is a huge, huge component of it. And I like hearing the interpretations of my own mind, I guess, when I read. All that being said, you can probably guess that I do prefer real books. That's my preference. And I don't think they're quite equal with audiobooks. I think that they are a different thing. I don't like it when people completely equate them. But at the same time, moving on to the audiobook side, at the same time, the essence of what a book is still in an audiobook. The story is still being told. There's a lot of snobby people looking down on people who listen to audiobooks, and that's not appropriate. I know that I can be a little bit like that sometimes, but audiobooks are a legitimate way to hear the story told, and sometimes they actually improve the story. something that I've noticed is that with a good narrator makes all the difference. I like how I don't have Audible anymore, and I don't really like it because you have to pay like 14 something a month. You get one free book, so you're paying like 14 something for one book, and then all the other books are so expensive. And it's like, I want to go to the library or use thrift books because they're so expensive. But that aside, I do like that on there you can listen to a sample of the narrator, because there's so many books. When I had Audible, there's so many books I would have gotten, but I listened to it and I was like, nope, I cannot do that narrator. There are so few narrators that I really like, and that's so important because that's the voice that you're going to have. And narrators really influence the story because they give different tones of voice to all the characters. Like, if you're reading it, you might have a very different interpretation of how people are saying things, which I've really noticed listening to certain audiobooks. It's like, oh, they're taking a very interesting attitude for that character that I wouldn't have associated with them. So some people are really bad at it. Surprisingly enough, actors are often very bad narrators. I don't know why that is, but Tom Hanks, amazing actor, terrible narrator. I listened to a book that he read by Ann Patchett a few years ago, and I didn't like the book anyway. It was a blah book, but his narration was awful. He just had like the same exact tone of voice for everybody, and he had this like slightly sarcastic tone the entire time, no matter what. It was really bad. But anyway, I do know some narrators that are really great, and something that I've noticed is that certain books lend themselves to audiobooks very well, particularly fantasy. Fantasy that's not maybe like high fantasy that's written in a kind of simple way that if you're reading it, it might feel amateur, like the writing itself might feel amateur, but when it's read, the writing's good enough, because a lot of the time the problem with fantasy is that they have these great stories in pretty rough writing. And an audiobook can really help that because it gives it personality, and you don't notice the writing as much, and you can just listen to the story. That's the thing. I would never want to listen to an audiobook of something very literary, because unless the narrator was just amazing, because I think books with beautiful language are more written to be read by yourself than to be heard read aloud. But yeah, fantasy books I think really do work well as audiobooks. And I've listened to a couple others that I like. It is legitimate. You are hearing the story. And I never listened to many audiobooks at all. I mean, I still haven't listened to very many audiobooks, but it is convenient at times. Yes, I think it's very worthwhile to make time for reading. Reading a good book is never a waste of time, but it is really nice when you're standing there doing a sink full of dishes by yourself and the house is quiet and you're like, man, I really wish that I could be reading a story right now, but there's no way that I can. An audiobook is great for things like that. And a lot of people have jobs where, if they're doing physical things, or that's not quite the right word, but anyway, they're doing things that they have their minds free to be able to listen. It is great for those kinds of things. And yeah, there's this idea that an audiobook is cheating and it's not legitimate, and that's stupid. You are hearing the story, you're getting the story every bit as much as somebody who read it. And maybe you have a bit of a different experience, maybe you have a different way of looking at it, but everybody does anyway. Everybody looks at stories a little bit differently based on the way that they read them. And an audiobook is just somebody else's way of doing it. And sometimes, if they're a good narrator, they can really make the story more special to you, because then you have these associations maybe of character voices that you love, that they made the characters more alive to you. Obviously, bad audiobooks, just don't listen to them. The same as like poorly written books, just don't read them, would be my advice. But audiobooks, I think, should not be judged right alongside regular books, or physical books, I should say. But They are legitimate. If anybody tells you, oh, you didn't really read it because you listened to the audiobook, don't listen to them. That's stupid. You got the story just the same as they did. The story was being told in the same words. So yes, personally, of course, I prefer physical books for a lot of reasons. The experience, the possession, the interpreting it in my own way. But audiobooks are 100% legitimate, and don't let anybody look down on you because you listen to them. So, those are my thoughts. There's probably a lot more that I could say, but even though I am definitely much more in the real book camp and I very rarely listen to audiobooks, I don't want to be a snob about it and look down on anybody who listens to audiobooks because they are legitimate. So, those are my thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.